This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
This episode is brought to you by Prizepicks, largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the Prizepicks app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. Also, our friends at Gametime take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. All right, as you can see, if you're watching us on YouTube, Greg is in a remote area somewhere in West Palm Beach trying to stay away from, some people trying to take his life, kidnap him. We're not sure. He's somewhere near bushes. He's also close to Mike Felger, which is never a good thing. Let's start here, Greg. Robert Kraft spoke today. You were there, obviously.
Yeah.
Just the first question, same one as I had for you yesterday with Mike Vrabel. What was the general vibe from RKK?
That's a good question, Nick. I hadn't even really thought about it, even though I did with Vrabel. I guess I would say, and I'm trying to compare it to like last year at this time. I guess I would say similar to Vrabel. I thought he was more relaxed, confident. Like, maybe he got his groove back a little bit with Vrabel being brought in, the offseason so far, which Kraft is obviously excited about. He told us again how he's been told to calm down, like all that stuff, and not get too excited. But I thought that Robert was relaxed. I'm trying to compare it. I'm trying to remember how he was last year with Mayo. I think it was more. He was also sort of confident with Mayo, but nothing had really transpired yet. It was like he had been hired like a month, 2 months before that, and I don't think like things started to get rocky until like the middle part of the year, as far as like June, July, once they started in on football things. So I would say that Robert looks comfortable, he looks confident, and thinks things are on the right track finally after what he termed, what do you call it?
He said the last 2 years have been really difficult,
years.
the worst 2 years
yeah.
of our ownership. I want to get into that a little bit later, but do you think he's a little too excited off free agency?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that he's always been overly optimistic. I mean, last year he sort of tempered it down and said something about, I'm hoping that it's not too rough, that sort of thing. I think that, I think that he's a little bit too excited. I think he's way too optimistic, like most years. Not specific to this year, because I do think that there's things to be excited about with the team, but there's still a long ways to go. And for him to say, I think it was Nicole Yang asked him like, what would constitute a successful season to you? And he said playoffs. Like, I mean, let's be a little realistic. I mean, I'm not saying that's not possible. I think it's totally possible with their schedule and also the division being down on the whole. I think that, they just won 2 games the previous 2 years, 8 games combined. And now you're talking about playoffs is sort of like, that's what would be a success. Now you're talking like that would be more wins than the previous 2 seasons combined. So let's slow our roll a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because I saw the interview that Felger had with Mike Vrabel yesterday, and Felger threw out the 7.5 to 8.5 over under. How's Vrabel feel? And Vrabel really didn't want to touch that. And so you can see the difference between the head coach trying not to go too crazy, setting expectations, and the owner. But I want to ask you, do you think that has any impact on fans at this point, Greg? Or do you think fans understand that Robert tends to get a little bit overexcited, a little bit too high of the expectations being set almost every single year?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some fans out there, probably, the grandmothers, that set Robert's sort of key demographic as far as his comments, all the time. I'm sure they like it when they're going to hear this stuff, but I think the majority of Patriots fans sort of roll their eyes, not just about his excitement, but I mean, every time we talk to him, he just hits it's the greatest hits collection. Now he added about being in the stands as a kid. He used to be, I think he was a little bit older before, but being in the stands and being a fan of the team and how it's his family and then the football team and the stadium being privately funded, like all that stuff. All of these, anytime he's in these scenarios, it's just a greatest hits collection for Robert. And I think that for most Patriots fans, it's wallpaper at this point, what he has to say about the team, unless it's pointed questions about spending and things like that. Other than that, I think people don't really care.
Yeah, we'll get to spending a little bit later because Robert did have something to say about that. But a couple of other things I wanted to hit with you quick here. Something that we haven't heard from Robert Kraft before over the last several years is Bill Parcells and this idea of Parcells being inducted into the Patriots Hall of Fame. Robert told all of you down there today, he broke some news that Parcells is indeed going to be inducted into the Patriots Hall of Fame. Were you surprised by that?
There were rumors about it. I had heard them, and I don't really care much about the Patriots Hall of Fame, so it's not like I'm going to go around and try to break news on it or anything like that. I'll just say this: I think this is long overdue. I think that Robert should have done this years ago when it was clear. I think Parcells was a finalist like 5 times and didn't get voted in by the fans, and that's how they do it. And of course they waived that for Tom Brady. They waived it for Dante Scarnecchia. Once it was clear after like 2 or 3 times that there's still a segment of the fan base that holds Parcells, holds it against him the way he departed the team and the Super Bowl run and making phone calls in New Orleans to the Jets to get his next job and all that stuff. Like, Robert just should have said, enough's enough. Let's put him in, because what he said today and what he said in news releases about his part in really setting the stage for what the Patriots brand became under Bill Belichick and Kraft and Tom Brady. It was Bill Parcells. He brought this franchise back into respectability. They were, I wasn't a Patriots fan, but I liked to watch them play, and they were always competitive. And that's Bill Parcells, and you can't underestimate that. And it's just because some fans have long memories in New England, which we know tends to happen. Kraft had a chance to right the wrong earlier. He finally did it, so that's great. I just wish it would have been done earlier.
Yeah, similar way with Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson. Jerry took forever to come around with Jimmy, and it was like, hey, look, the success was the success. Jimmy Johnson, what he did for that program. And it was weird. It took until 2023 for Jerry Jones to turn it around and say, all right, we're going to do it. By the way, Bill Parcells did speak with Karen Garrigian, one of the OGs here in New England, about being inducted. He said, I wasn't shocked, but I wasn't anticipating it either. How it went down, he said, he got on the phone. Kraft told him that what he was going to do. We had a very pleasant conversation. I told him I appreciated it very much. I'm humbled and very appreciative. I like New England. I had 2 tours of duty there. I like being there very much. It's a special place. Talking about how he handled ownership, he said, if I was a little more forceful at the time, I would have handled things differently, but I don't want to get into any of the details. Talking about how they both turned 84. He says that's the conversation we've had, the first conversation we've had, and I think we had it because we're both of the age where life's too short for that stuff. So Parcells also says this is the 3rd Hall of Fame I've been put into, so I don't take it for granted. I can tell you that. So that's what Parcells had to say about his impending induction into the Patriots Hall of Fame. Meanwhile, we look forward here, Greg, and we talk about succession plans. I don't know if you watched the show Succession. I watched the show Succession. It's a fantastic show. Robert was asked about the succession plan, and at first he's telling people, look, I'm younger than you think I am, and that whole spiel. And that's when he got into the, I used to go to the stadium when I was younger and all the stuff you just went through. But he mentioned a couple of things. Number one, Greg, he said that Jonathan Kraft has been by his side for the last 30-odd years, and that, I don't know the exact phrasing, but I'm paraphrasing here, that he was really at the heart of many of these decisions and has been a part of this thing really since day one. Is that one of the first times that Robert has let us know that Jonathan has had that much of a hand in how things have been run, especially recently?
Yes. And I bet you Jonathan is not happy that he said it that way. And, what exactly he said was, and I asked him the question. I thought, look, a year ago at this time, I wrote a column after we heard from him at the league meetings where, he was just meandering. He didn't answer any questions. Like, there were a lot of hard questions that had to be asked and answered, like, in a direct way, and we weren't getting that. And I wrote a column last year basically saying, like, it's time for him to step aside, at least as the public face, in terms of answering questions for this franchise, because, look, hard questions need to be asked. It might be moot now that they have Vrabel and there's going to be success, but we had to ask a lot of questions. We have to ask follow-up questions, and like we get them for like 15 minutes. And look, at his age, I when I wrote it, I said, like, it's like we're sticking daggers into Paddington Bear. Like, it's a no-win situation for us. Like, we can't badger him at his age. We're not going to come off well. He's not answering our questions. And so finally, I wanted to get him on the record about succession plans, or at least, and I phrased the question because I looked it up. Ralph Wilson of the Bills at 83, Dan Rooney of the Steelers at 84 stepped aside. And I was just wondering if have there been any discussions, like, coming up here, like in the near future, that he might do that. And to me, it looked like it was he didn't like the question, obviously, but whatever. I have a job to do. We need to get him on the record about this. Hell, John Henry was put on the record by Felger and Maz about 10 years ago as far as the succession plan for the Red Sox. And, he basically, it looked to him like it was a foreign concept, that he had never even contemplated, like, stepping away anytime soon, which was a little bit concerning to me. But yeah, the exact quote about Jonathan said, as far as succession is there. My eldest son, Jonathan, has been part of every key decision I've made for the last 30 odd years and is a full partner in everything. He stays out of the limelight. That runs completely counter to what Jonathan says, how he's phrased it, like he's got paper products to worry about. The PR department of the Patriots goes out of their way to keep Jonathan out of things, whether it be pictures or press conferences or whatever. And now Robert is telling you Jonathan has been part of everything, and he is heavily involved in this team. So that's a clear departure on the messaging as far as Jonathan's role on this team, which, because of all the reporting from places, specifically ESPN, Jonathan doesn't want to entertain it and be like, oh, well, he has other businesses to run. No, it seems like the Patriots are one of his key focuses.
Why do you think that change happened today? Was it just that Robert was caught off guard by the question, which is very interesting, given that he's 84 years old? You have to imagine you're going to get the question about succession. Why all of a sudden that change where now Jonathan, yes, he's been a big-time part of things here?
I think he was surprised. I think they keep the chatter away from him about, criticisms. I mean, just remember a year ago when it came to the NFLPA survey, like, Robert just recently had been informed about it. He had no idea about it. So I think they keep that stuff away from him so he doesn't hear the criticism. I think that he thinks everything is, relatively hunky-dory as far as the fan base and him, which is completely out of touch. And, I also think he fumbled the answer again, like he is prone to do because of his age. And, look, nothing against Robert, but at some point everybody slows down. Hell, I'm, 51 and I'm slowing down and not as sharp as I once was, which I'm sure a lot of people would agree with. But I think he was caught off guard, and I think that he just completely fumbled the answer.
This might be a given based on what you said just a few moments ago, but I just want to make sure here. So when Robert says Jonathan likes to stay out of the limelight, is that a Jonathan decision, 100%?
As far as I know from talking to people, yeah. I think he's basically what Robert said is like he likes to be behind the scenes as the puppet string puller. Like, that's what he likes to do, and that's what people think he is. And I think that basically what Robert said today confirms everything that's been reported about Jonathan Kraft, especially over the last, 2, 3, 4 years, as far as his involvement in things. Belichick's people pushing it out there that, him and Robin Glazer are going to run football and, all that stuff. So, yeah, I think that, Jonathan definitely wants to be, he doesn't want anybody to talk about him, but everybody is.
Last one about the succession deal here. Robert mentioned, something about checking the next 2-3 years. Is the plan where like Robert's just gonna hang around as, hey, I feel good this morning, and if nobody tells me to get out of here, I'm just going to continue to push this thing, and hey, maybe we'll make a change in 2029, 2030. Is that actually, I mean, obviously given the health of Robert, is that the deal here, Greg?
I don't know. I mean, I thought it was a strange answer to the question. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seemed to the look on his face when I asked the question and when he was answering it, to me, I read it as, I'm not leaving until my health fails me. So it could be a very long time. It could, hopefully he has great health for many years to come. But that's the way I read it. Did you read it that way?
I did. It felt like somebody who right now in the moment on April 1st, 2025, feels good enough to own the football team and keep up what he's been doing. And I don't think in his mind he's going to slow down anytime soon. And you see this all the time, Greg. It's not just in football. It's across the country. It's across the world. Owners of companies and monopolies and all that stuff, they know what they know. They love what they love. And they're going to do it until somebody forces them to do it, or they just can't do it anymore. And sometimes they can't do it anymore, but they think they can do it.
Right.
So it's a very difficult and delicate situation. All right, let's take a pause here.
Prizepicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prizepicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prizepicks. I've been doing it. Celtics, they're tonight. I'll be in front of the TV watching that on my computer down here in Florida, and I'll be using Prizepicks to cash in. Prizepicks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. The app is really easy to use. To create a lineup, all you have to do is pick more or less on a few player stats for your shot to win up to 1,000 times your money.
All right, let's continue, Greg, on Kraft's press conference with you guys down there in West Palm Beach in Florida. You mentioned this a little bit about, Robert talking about how bad the last couple of years has been. He says he never wants to draft 4th again. I want to ask you this from the fan standpoint, and even maybe from some in the media. Do you think that some still underappreciate how bad the drafting was over the past 7, 8, 9, 10 years and how far that truly set the team back? Because I feel like the conversation is still out there of like, well, they're just not as good because they don't want to spend. And you and I have had this discussion. I talked about this, 2 months ago on 98.5. The lack of spending has a lot to do with bad drafting because you don't retain the talent because you don't have talent to retain. And you also, the quarterback position where you underpaid Brady for years, and then you went to Mac on a rookie deal, and then you went to, now Drake May on a rookie deal.
Cam Newton making $1 million.
Yeah, and the Cam Newton project. Do you think that there's a good amount of people that still underappreciate how bad the drafting was for a stretch and still has been recently, and how that really set this team behind the 8 ball?
And the thing is like, I remember back in those days, like when we used to point out, like, this is going to be a problem, like this draft sucked. And, you'll just hear from fans like, ooh, we finished in first place. Oh, we won another Super Bowl. Like, they didn't really care. They were blinded by it. But the truth of the matter is, and Kraft's exactly right. And, I know some of it is, some of his comments are self-serving and things like that and sort of putting it on Bill a little bit. I mean, but he's not wrong. And, like, that's the lifeblood of a team. And Vrabel had a comment the other day about, like, if you whiff on drafts, then you're chasing it in free agency, and then you get in this vicious cycle. And it's it's funny. I had a conversation with an NFL owner, last night, and we were talking about, how his team, came back. And I'm not going to reveal the owner, but he also talked about it. This team I view, similar to the Patriots. They went through, sort of a tough stage before they had like a organizational awakening as far as analytics and this stuff, and putting it all together to now they're back on track and everything. And I think that the Patriots had to be humbled. They had to see it finally show up on the field instead of winning divisions and winning playoff games, even though behind the scenes the foundation of the house was crumbling. They finally, a lot of people just had to see it. And I think some people underestimate it? Yeah, I do. But a lot of them just want to blame like Elliott Wolf or Robin Glazer and all these things. There's got to be a devil, like why this has happened to the Patriots. And the fact of the matter is, it just slowly deteriorated over years, and at some point, that's going to come due.
Robert said that he doesn't think the Patriots are at ground zero of the rebuild. I think you and I would agree with that, but I wanted to ask you, Greg, where do you think they are in regards to the phases and stages of a rebuild?
I don't I hear some people talk about especially, before this offseason, they're talking about like it's going to be a multi-year rebuild in like 3 years. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I think this team has gotten to, and we still got to wait for the draft, what they do at left tackle, if they add another receiver, all that stuff. I think the floor is now, with the Diggs edition, it was 6 before that. I'd say the floor is 7, but there's a whole lot of upside there to be, get to 8, 9, maybe 10 wins. I mean, look at the Commanders last year. They went from 4 wins to 12 wins, and if I'm not mistaken, they were in the NFC Championship game. And so, I think I don't think there's much of a rebuild still yet to be done. This team should be competitive this year with what they spent, the people they brought in as far as coaches and front office and things like that. So that's my expectation.
I mean, look, we're not going to go through the WL game and go through every game on the schedule, but let's just remind people of what this schedule looks like for 2025. Home games against the Panthers, the Browns, the Giants, the Jets, the Raiders, 4 or 5 of the worst teams in football. And then your road schedule is pretty difficult. You got to play at Baltimore, at Buffalo, at Cincy. Obviously, those are tough. At Miami is always tough. But you play the Saints. They're not very good. The Jets are not going to be very good. Tennessee is not good. You do have to play at Tampa. So when you look at the schedule, you can look at 5 or 6 games and feel at least somewhat optimistic that, hey, if they got their shit straight, they're going to win those games. Let's talk about spending. I know you've written a lot about spending, a long piece going back before free agency about how much money the Patriots have to spend to hit the 90% threshold and all of that. Robert said today, Greg, to you guys and gals down there, never once in 31 years has he not spent when asked to spend, right? My question is this. Is he playing semantics here a little bit? Because he said, let me correct something. I want to get the exact quote for you. There's never been a case in 31 years when people have come to us wanting to spend and we said no, not once. Is there a little bit of a game here, Greg, that Robert can play? Whereas, like, maybe he sets the standards of how much is going to be spent. So he says, hey, look, here's the money that you have to spend. Spend it the way you want. So nobody's ever going to really come to him and ask him, hey, can we pay $35 million for this guy?
Yeah, you're 100% right that, it's semantics at this point because, they set a budget. They basically say, he said it before. He said they have basically a 3-year budget where you can spend to the cap. You can exceed it a little bit, like the previous 3 years. I think they were. Hold on one second. They were over. So that's 2021 through 2023. They finished that 3-year period plus $6.5 million. That's after going $52 million over the cap in 2021. And I just wanted to update people as far as this year at this point. So last year, they were $14.6 million over the cap in terms of the cash spent. This year, they're $10 million under. But you also have to remember, I don't think that includes the draft class. And so that's 25 million just for the number 4 overall pick. So they are over. So they've already reached the limits. And next year they're probably going to have to be under to be in the ballpark. But you're right. Kraft sets a budget. They know what the budget is. So they're not going to go ask them, unless there's a special case like an Antonio Brown type of situation. They're not going to go say, hey, Robert, can we sign this guy to $75 million contract and blow our budget? Because Kraft's going to be like, no, get out of here. We're not doing that. You know what your budget is. You have a plus minus of, say, like 20 million after the 3-year period. But other than that, go pound sand.
Yeah, you got to get out to a game, get the atmosphere, whether it's NCAA, NFL, MLB, what have you. Gametime can get you there. It's the easiest place. I love that app. They have Gametime picks, curates to make it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. All-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. That's a must for me. They have a lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Come back. Check us out over at BSJ, $50 for the year. Bedard, Giardi do a great job on the Patriots coverage. You also want to download the Prizepicks app today. Use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. We got just 3 more questions here for Greg before he's got to run and do Felger and Maz down there in West Palm. Robert didn't seem too happy about the ashtray anecdote in the report card. Said there are not ashtrays on the team plane, damn it. There's not a single ashtray on that plane. They are going to update them. I will say, though, on a serious note, Greg, I was pleased that Robert, and this is really the second straight year when he's told what's in there. I don't know if he knows beforehand. And they did make tangible changes with the babysitting and the family stuff last year. They did make some tangible changes, and they're obviously building the new facility. I don't know about you, but I'm pleased that Robert, it does seem like these report cards, they cause him to act and do things, whereas like Woody Johnson this week is sitting there calling the report bogus, and he's going crazy. At least Robert seems to understand what the perception is and the reputation, and he's taking some steps to address them. Am I right or wrong?
Right. I mean, I will say that there are people associated with the Patriots who would agree with Woody Johnson, and I don't disagree with Woody Johnson. I think a lot of this stuff is whiny, entitled stuff from players, especially like we don't know. I wish the reporting of the grades was a little bit more accurate, that there was a little bit more detail to it. But I think that, I think that Robert, the public shaming, gets him to move. I mean, look, that one last year resulted in the babysitting, the family room, whatever, in a new facility. Partly that was because of the World Cup coming as well. But yeah, I mean, I think some of the stuff's ridiculous, but I do think it's important, and I do think he listens because we know, like, he cares what people say about his organization, and if people are, calling him cheap or calling the organization cheap, and they're not doing X, Y, and Z, that bothers him. If anybody bothers to tell him, which a lot of times they don't.
And that's a point I want to make. Robert said that the player survey was quote unquote eye-opening. Maybe it shouldn't be eye-opening, Robert, right? I mean, that seems to be a problem. Like, you should be aware of what's going on. You should be aware of the planes and the shape that they're in, and the facility and what's going. Maybe that tells you, Robert, that you need to be a little bit more involved on a day-to-day basis. This stuff should not be eye-opening or shocking. All right, two things about the NFL I want to ask you before you run. A couple of rule changes here. Well, one rule change I want to ask you about, another that's been quote-unquote tabled. What's your take on all of this tush push shit?
I am against the tush push. I want it out of the game. To me, it's not a football play. To me, and we heard from Rich McKay, chairman of the competition committee, so that was tabled. And basically what that means is, and it seems like the owners want it. Goodell wants it. Most of the owners want it. And basically, when there's not a consensus and you got the coaches here, blah, 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 like what they do is they table it. And then at the owners only meeting in like May, then they ram stuff through. I remember when they did that, a few years ago. They do it almost every year. Anything that the league wants that maybe some of the coaches don't want, they just move it to the spring meetings and then they ram it through. I am against the tush push. I think it's not a football play. Rich McKay talked about it in 2004. It used to be when I was growing up, you couldn't push the ball carrier. You couldn't push or pull the ball carrier. And they took it out. I don't know why they took it out. I wasn't in the press conference. I don't know why they took it out 20 years ago, but they should put it back in and we should get back to playing real football because it's not a football play. It's a rugby play. And I don't want to see it anymore. It's become too widespread across the league. That's only going to increase. Fans aren't tuning in to see the tush push. They're tuning in to see offense, passing offense, great quarterbacks, great running backs, great receivers, all that stuff. Not a rugby play.
My take is a simple take on this play. The defensive players are not allowed to do it, so the offensive players should not be allowed to do it. If you're on the offensive side of the ball and you get guys behind you shoving you into the defensive line, that's an unfair advantage because defensive players can't do the same. You can't pull up your safeties and cornerbacks and have those guys pushing defensive linemen into the line of scrimmage. So you're either going to have it be fair for both and say, no, you can push and you can push, and we'll have the double tush push, which we've all been waiting for. Or you say, no, we're going to get rid of it because defensive players are not allowed to do it. The second part of that is Jonathan Jones from CBS, not the former cornerback of the Patriots. He reported from one of his sources that 16 teams opposed the rule to ban the tush push. So you need 24 teams to say this needs to get out of here with the competition committee. So it seems like it's literally 50-50. Half the league is out on it. Half the league says keep it. And we'll see if the owners push it through like Greg mentioned. Last one for you, Greg. The kickoff, the dynamic kickoff, isn't that what they called it? The dynamic kickoff has been somewhat changed now. Teams will get the ball at the 35-yard line instead of the 30-yard line. Does that impact the play to you a lot?
I do. I mean, I think that we're going to see a lot more returns, which, I guess is good. I've never been big on the kickoff, but if you're going to have it, and I did think it was an interesting point today that Darren Rizzi of now the Broncos, he's been around the league as one of the best special teams coaches in the country. He talked about, and Troy Vincent actually talked about this, and he said, as a guy like who basically got into the league or got a foot in the league, and I don't know if that was true. He was on the Dolphins. He was a first-round pick out of Wisconsin. He was pretty damn good. But basically saying, like, he started his career on special teams. And there's a lot of guys where special teams are their foot in the door in the National Football League, and then they can stay in, and then they go on to bigger and better things, playing positionally and all that stuff. And so, I kind of agree with it there. But, if you're going to have the play in the game, make it more exciting, especially with these kickers, the way they blast it into the end zone with regularity.
Are you a Mai Tai guy, a margarita guy, a beer guy? What kind of guy are you?
I am a hard seltzer guy now.
Hard seltzer guy.
A little bit better for you.
Now he says.
I used to be a beer guy, but it's a little better for you.
Yeah. Well, are you leaving today or are you leaving tomorrow?
I am leaving first thing in the morning.
Okay, well, maybe you'll sneak in a couple of hard seltzers tonight, especially when you get done. Especially when you get done with Felger in a few minutes, my buddy.
I'm going right to the bar here at the Breakers to pound a couple because I'm going to need it.
Safe travels, my friend. He's Greg. I'm Nick. We'll talk to you later.